Hey guys, my name is Fossil, and today we're going to have a discussion on AI agents in the enterprise. We have a bunch of great people here, so I'll let you guys introduce yourselves, starting with Natalie.
Hey everyone, Natalie Meurer. I lead our agent engineering team at Sierra. Been at the company about 2.5 years or so. Built a lot of agents in probably the 8 different ways that we built agents over that 2.5 years. And these days, I'm really focused on just talking to folks about building agents. So excited to chat.
Hi, I'm Juhi. I'm a GM for Subkey Frontier AI accounts and Turing. So we do host training, design, benchmark, research with the Frontier Lab like Anthropic, OpenAI, teams, and others. And we also deploy agents. So I look at like sales, R&D, and delivery, and basically building these like benchmarks with some of the key labs.
I'm Kevin. I'm an FTE at Intercom, joined last year, and spent a lot of time on the customer side, their customer support functions.
Hey, I'm Coach. I'm founding AG at Mercor. I've been at Mercor for almost like 4 years. So prior to Mercor was at started 2023. And yeah, I help in like managing cloud infra and like help on like other environments and development of agents on those enterprises. Yeah, excited to be here.
All right, so let's get started with something a little fun, I guess. What have you been using AI agents for, just like daily? Like, what's been really useful for you in the last week?
Well, I actually tried something for the first time this past week. Sierra has grown a lot. If you don't know, we're a conversational AI startup. We build agents for customer experience. And so at the start of every week, I basically want to know where I need to direct my attention. So I have basically access to an internal MCP gateway for Slack, as well as linear, and a couple other things, and basically have a clock skill that summarizes it for me, and then you can use basically text-to-speech to summarize that on my way to work. I have about a 25-minute commute, so I'll do that, and then I'll basically have a conversation in the morning on the way to work, and then I show up kind of ready to go. So, yeah, used to spend Sunday doing it, so much better now.
That's actually very cool. I've done something similar where I can just ask, I've created this agent and I can just ask them what are the most important Slack messages on some of the key channels and where should I pay attention. So I think that just helps me stay on top of it. But apart from that, the 2 things that I think that I did, I would a huge unlock. I use Claude co-work and subscribe from promotion email. I hit my token limit, but that was I'm not it. It was huge unlock. And and one more thing was that basically our CEO does these code with John sessions of late every Sunday. It's actually pretty cool, and all of us just hang out from 7 to 9 p.m. and do something. So one of the things that I built was essentially one of the ideas that I came up and executed was an agent which would essentially basically start reminding you of things to do prior to an event. Say you have a birthday party and then it will create these calendar blocks that will remind you, oh, you need to buy a gift, and then send a card or things like that, and then schedule. So that will actually be recommended.
I was also going to say that Slack entry on the skill that I built on Claude. So, well, different one, but something not work related, I guess. I wanted to build something kind of, I don't know, agentic consumer facing product from scratch. So I built myself a wine tracker for tracking stuff at restaurants or at home. Built like a traditional SaaS version, and then we converted that to more of an agent-based thing. And then I've always kind of liked trying to track and plan trips, and it's fun to watch. Over time, starts off pretty awful, and it's only getting better and better. And I like to feed more context for a personalized every time I trip doing. So it's that I have a bunch of info. We're going to France for a friend's wedding. Wanted to plan a wine trip around it, so I got all the info from my wine tracker right there. Try to plan a little bit of a trip based on what I drank in the past. What was interesting.
I don't have anything extraordinary from what they already mentioned. Like, pretty much like I have, we have internal agents as well, like, which are own MCP tools for our own tools, our own services, like they sprawl across like Slack, GitHub, Linear, and find critical issues, and like we also have corresponding agents which like resolve the issues, and then some of them are escalated to us, and like, we just know about those tickets. So it's pretty much similar to what these guys already mentioned. So.
Cool. All right. So this series is called Forward Deployed. So Natalie, you used to work at Palantir, which basically popularized the term forward deployed engineering. So like, what did you learn at Palantir that you're implementing at Sierra?
It's a really interesting question, and there's probably a follow-up related to the differences that I see between agent engineering and forward deployed engineering. I think both very accountable to our customers, but sort of different in the technical work. I think what Palantir teaches, actually Dr. Karp, the founder of Palantir and CEO, said something to all the new grads that started there and have the role of forward deployed engineering, that your first job out of college will shape how you think. And I think if there's one way that Palantir shapes how you think, it's basically a bias to action. Sometimes you're to your own detriment when you get into other organizations. I think Palantir sort of instills a certain sense of autonomy and agency in terms of seeing a problem and just, pulling something together. I'm sure today this is probably even greater given the ability to use, quad code, codex, your vibe coding tool of choice to prototype things. So I think that's something I really tried to bring to Sierra when we founded the agent engineering team. And I think that accountability to say like, okay, great, you just gave me this requirement. How quickly can we get you something? That speed and that iteration loop is really important and successful for deployed motion. So customer obsession is one of Sierra's values, so it wasn't exactly a hard sell internally, but the intensity of it, especially at the speed of AI, I think you have to be kind of ready to do the context switching and sort of the speed to iterate quite quickly.
Yeah. What is forward deployed engineering like at Intercom?
It's similar. We touched a lot of pieces of the product, and we'll get brought into a handful of our higher value customers. But it looks very different now than it did some point 7 months ago. It was much more manual, a little bit slower, and a combination of tooling that we built internally and the writing the wins of model improvements has allowed us to jump in and spin up workspaces for potential customers. A few hours, get them to appointments and deploy it within a day or two. And decreasing that time to value has been our main focus. And we've been around for a while and have a decent amount of legacy software. So what we're talking about and having a bias towards action is one of the most important things in our group. Being able to go out and change things that we hear customers back from. Needs is changing without having to interface with 2 different product teams, all towards that goal of driving down.
Yeah. So like earlier, before we got up here, you guys were talking about how like 7 months feels like forever, like 2 years feels like forever. What were agents not good at like 12 months ago or 24 months ago that they are good at now? Like what are some examples? Anyone can start. Yeah.
All right, I've been prompted to go first from the group. So I mean, 2 years ago, it was such a different world in terms of agents. Interestingly, actually, Sierra, we started with an open platform for building agents, a UI, and it was scrapped actually within probably the first 3 or 4 months we were there. So when my team was founded, we had sort of settled on building agents in code, which is quite, I think, unusual in the CX space where you're typically building agents for a less technical audience. And so I think that was actually one of the quite unique aspects of Sierra early on. Today, that has dramatically changed because the tooling has changed, right? And so what you can actually do with agents, the level of care that you actually, or I'd say actually precision necessarily that you need to build an agent has changed dramatically. And the term agent, right, is sourced from this idea of agency. And you actually couldn't really give agents that much agency early on. You had to heavily constrain them. And particularly, you had to really think about defining both the conversation flow as well as all the integrations and basically everything else around it. Today, you sort of can, basically give an agent more of a goal and then let it pursue that goal. And I think there's no greater example of this than what you can do with reasoning models now. Reasoning models aren't as powerful when you have a highly latency constrained space like a voice agent. But when you think about just open-ended problem solving, agents are clearly leagues and leagues ahead of that. And I've probably experienced 5 or 6 different shifts in that 2 years, just in terms of how we build agents. So, that's where it started.
And the big shift now, I guess, is agents from the outside and agents a big set of workspace.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
New tools that you announced, a similar one coming up next week. But a lot of our stuff kind of starts internal and we dog fooded by like a lot of the times our biggest power users and stress testing products before we launch them. I think if we launched something that was more agentic on the configuration side of things last year, it would be questionable at best. Things have changed a lot in the last even 3-4 months. Like you said, you can point them in a direction how they can find their way, whereas you have to steer them a lot more directly than last year.
Actually, I have a question for Kevin Lynch. Move to you. What does like steering an agent mean? Like what did that mean? 12 months ago.
Depends which one.
Yeah.
If you're talking about steering like your own quad code sessions, that's one thing. If you're talking about steering something like Fin, Intercom started off as kind of this like UI-based, deterministic. Customer support reps can come in to define how a customer flows through their chat experience. Still have bits and pieces of that. So for Intercom, it's been kind of melding this like determinism and non-determinism in a way that makes sense for customer success leaders. So for them, they want to make sense of what's in control. And so for our way of doing things, a lot of that is like ensuring that they have an observable system that they can run the customer success teams on while also letting them use the integration stuff.
I see. So like on the back end, it was kind of like a Zapier was supposed that someone was controlling, hey, this is what you do in this case when someone says XYZ thing. Go in this direction.
It's basically like a platform, right? So
Yeah.
you can branch based off
Yeah.
certain attributes or whatever.
Yeah.
There's fun names for everything to make technical things a little bit less technical.
Yeah.
So you've got data connectors instead of API endpoints.
Yeah.
And that's still the case, but like that's kind of this translation like between
And it's like
the infrastructure and a customer success leader might be
okay, cool.
configuring something.
Yeah. Actually, I'd like to add on this one as well. Like, prior to like 1 year, I would say like models were also not that good. Like, agent harnesses were like not that good, and you had to focus on focus on the prompts, like what should the agent do and like how should it do it. And currently, like models are getting even so good. Like, and the harnesses are so good that like you just mention what to do, and like you will need to explicitly say what not to do, and like focus on that part, like what not to do, and like why how to not go crazy. So I would say that is the big shift which I personally observed in this space.
I see that you're saying you don't have to explicitly tell them what not to do.
Yeah. No, I'm saying
the
like
opposite.
opposite.
Okay.
Yeah, you did like
Yeah.
guardrails. You
Yeah.
just said the guardrails. But I think so Sierra came up with the term agent, right?
I don't think we can claim that. As much as I'd love to.
Agent
But I
engineer.
Agent engineer will
I
claim
read the
it.
blog. Like I think it was one of like the first blogs like where they introduced like a concept like this. But I think so the theory on it basically is that like the models are getting better at reasoning and the agents are getting better at long horizon tasks. And when there's long horizon tasks, we're talking about like 10 plus hours of work, then the agent can constantly do like 20 minutes to probably less than that. And now where the labs are moving is that can the models become so good that agent can do like the task in 1 hour, which would probably take a human like a week. And when we're thinking of that and we work backwards from there is so much that we human might do in that 1 week, right? Like there's so much context switching, changing assumptions, like reasoning, And then if you think of it from like a Turing perspective, like the tool calling and the scaffolding, which is like the harness around the model, and the agent harness is also getting better. So it's just like, so I think that's essentially there's a big change, I'd say. Progress. That's the progress.
Yeah. I guess like before we continue, could we define some of these terms just in case people are not familiar? So I think we'll probably get into a lot of this stuff. So like RL environment, we'll probably get into pretty soon. Harness, like what is a harness? Yeah, let's just start with that. So what is a harness, and maybe we can go into RL environments later. Yeah.
I get it. That's fun. Basically, like we have agents, like your models, created by labs and like I would say like harness is like tooling or like the way we want to execute the model in a loop, and like what are the rules you give the models, how you handle their context, like how you handle their like execution plans, guardrails. So that is what a harness is like. Cloud code is a harness, like Anthropic's model. That's the harness.
And so like how does Mercor play that? Like do you guys help make harnesses better? Like
We help evaluate agents and so agents have harness inbuilt and then so like we help them benchmark it and treat them. Also provide like data and loss analysis to the labs, and based on that like they eventually improve the hardness or like they improve the quality of data for the model. So there are different types of failures here. Like it can be a hardness failure, it can be a data failure for the agent. So what Mercor does is like they provide the environments and the experts. Experts are the main like selling part, right? So you provide the expertise who like create tasks and like they will help. Experts will create tasks for like law like financial task, and then they will also create the verifiers and like the boolean answer to the task, and like then we run the agent in the environment and see where it failed and where it like passed, and we provide those events to the labs, which helps them like improve their harness or like improve their harness.
interesting. Natalie, so you said that you specifically work on agents for like the financial space. So are you guys building your own emails? Are you working with companies like Mercor or Turing to help you with that?
We actually build most of our stuff in house, honestly. Whether that be financial services or any other industry. I think what's interesting about what we do is unlike actually harness engineering, which is usually more focused on solving open-ended problems, we certainly do some of that. Actually, Kevin mentioned Ghostwriter, which is effectively a harness for building agents that we is part of our product. But our core product, right, the agent, the design constraint for us is basically, can you, for an arbitrary business, not do something for the first time new, but actually do the same thing 100,000 times a week correctly? And so it's sort of a different problem than the harness engineering problem, which is and sort of demands a different approach in some ways. So to eval that, just to mention to some of our oldest customers, if you take the SiriusXM agent, what you would want to evaluate there would be very different than what you would want to evaluate in, say, the Sonos agent focused on speaker troubleshooting. So across those, we effectively establish simulation tests that simulate conversations with the agent, with a hypothetical user. We do these on chat and voice and any other channel. And then that effectively becomes a regression test for our agent that's run on every release. So we have sort of an integration testing layer. And then when you go a layer deeper, we use a constellation of models under the hood. So we're actually orchestrating a number of different models together. There, we actually do have task-specific evals. We're evaluating, say, a classifier or response model or any of the other basically pieces in that constellation. So no tremendous eval magic, but we do a lot of evals in house, and we financially retain some of our own models. So we obviously have to eval this.
Yeah.
Yeah. In our case, like we also provide the harness sometimes, like with our data sets. So it's similar, but the unique vantage point that we have is that we deploy agents in enterprises where we work with financial services, right? Like we work with Goldman Sachs, PTR, so we know exactly who the models are failing or not good in real world scenarios. And then that helps us give them signal into what you were saying, like loss patterns in the model, right? What are the failure modes? And like example, John is not very good at tool calling. So like, how can you get better at like specific tool calling or document generation or like visual alignment, for example. And yes, and for that, like essentially like all the labs right now are moving towards RL. Like everyone's just mostly on the work, all the data work that we do also RL, so you're generating either RL tasks or you're generating RL environments, basically. Yeah.
All right, so maybe that's a good point to explain that. What is an RL environment? Because it seems like a very hot topic right now.
What's the data?
For us, like I would say, it differs on like how we implement different companies implement different papers. Like the basic idea is that like, you provide a world where the model or the agent goes into that world and like acts like an employee or a developer or something like they are asked to do a task. And task is nothing but a prompt asked by the expert that hey, you need to like file my IT returns and like in the same world, it's provided like all the resources like the W2s or the PNL and everything, right? So then it's up to the model or the agent to pick up those things and like complete the task. And in the same IL environment, when the task is over, like there are verifiers like, which verify the results or whether the agents did, like whether the model or the agent did the task accurately or whether the numbers add up or not. And experts also create the verifiers. And then there is the golden example or the golden answer to the task, like what should be the final answer. Like based on that, it's eventually derived that whether the agent or model like passed the task or not. So this is whole the RLM world, and it is in a sandboxed environment where like, we throw in like agent or like there are sometimes multi-agent worlds where like when we want to like simulate actual world scenario like where there are like co-workers and like it's interacting with different agents and like that's how it's evolving over the like the next few phases.
I think to add to that, it's basically like since concept, RL was basically a concept in like gaming simulation robotics, and then you just like translate that into say like agentic tasks now. So you have state, you have action, you have like a state basically like which is your base state, and then agent takes up actions, and then you can reward the agent based on that the state or not. So that's what's called rewards, and then you have verifiers. And the ground truth is basically like a human judgment on whether what it's doing is actually right or not. And that can also be, and this is very simplistic. This is a very simple way in which I'm explaining, and this does not by no means is like. So you should definitely go and like pick your favorite LLM and ask them like, what do you mean by RL environments? But yeah, so think of it as like basically like this simulation. Where like the agent is essentially where the
Can we go through like a concrete example? So I guess like Finn and Sierra, you guys are building basically customer service agents, I would call it. Maybe you disagree, but customer service agents. So what would an RL environment for a customer service agent look like? Or is that even the right frame
For the customer or for actual
RL environment? I guess like you're building an RL environment for a customer service agent to improve the agent.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Our agent is more based around the configuration on the client side, right? So a lot of it is almost giving whoever is configuring that thing their own little mini RL environment. It's not actually an RL environment, but they are given the like necessary tools to see what it is doing and make adjustments based off of that and kind of tweak, I guess, what the model is doing. But a lot of that's more configuration and even like an actual training model, which we also do, but that's separate.
Yeah, so reinforcement learning generally just there's all sorts of ways that you can do it. RLHF, for example, was a reinforcement learning with human feedback was sort of how many of these initial chat models were really trained or in sort of the post-training process. So these days, if you were to define, say, a reinforcement learning environment, right, for a customer support agent, you would effectively have tools available, right? And actually we have a benchmark at Sierra called TauBench that's used actually for many of these agents to sort of benchmark different models and how good they are at solving some of these customer support problems. And we've had to keep updating the benchmark because it keeps getting blown out of the water, which gives you a sense for the past couple of years. So in any case, basically that environment, that sandbox is effectively tools and then effectively an outcome that you need to measure, which is evaluated effectively as a database outcome. So you actually have an agent running on a defined customer support case, and then you're attempting to achieve basically a flight change, for example. And if you achieve that, then you're rewarded, which is the actual training process. In the benchmark, it's effectively evaluating the agent's performance, so it's not a true RL sandbox. But that's effectively how it would work in a customer support journey. Anything, I mean, you're really expert here, so anything to add?
No, I think so. There are like different types of customer service, like our environments also there, and I can speak to I can speak to like the model training aspect of it, like what kind of RL environments we be able to do researchers like for like model training. I broadly divided it into two types. Like there are like UI environments and then there are normal UI and SP based environments. In UI, so for example, it could be something like a Salesforce. Maybe that's CRM, I would say customer service, but you could probably take like it's something like a conversation or like a ticket resolution or some use case like that when you're like say for United Airlines, and then just like have like a UI. It could also be like a recording of like the users are taking actions, and then that can also feed into the data. But now 10x this and then build an environment and a sandbox around it, and so we get different types of such actions and tasks and long horizon tasks. That becomes like a
Harsh, you have anything? Yeah, no worries. So I guess, so these benchmarks seem like there's offline, there's like online benchmarks, right? Like, so how do you guys look at offline benchmarks, which I guess like ComBench, would you say that's like an offline benchmark, or you're doing it based on like real data that you're getting from your agent development?
It's certainly inspired by things that I've seen in a while, but as I said, every customer, inclusive of within the same industry, no two insurance companies, for example, look the same. Even if you're filing and claiming both cases, many of these companies are 100 plus years old. We work with ADT, the home security company. They celebrated their 150th anniversary while we were partnered with them. It was like a year and a half ago. So anyway, this is all to say that the actual internal system, so to take, the sort of sandbox example, all of these systems, you might have dramatically different tools and dramatically different environments for each. So we don't actually do any sort of benchmarking or any formal training on those environments, but certainly the TauBench scenarios are constructed towards that.
I see. So you're saying like on a per customer basis, you're not really using the benchmarks?
The benchmarks are designed to be generalized to evaluate general models. But the benchmarks are not the ADT benchmark, right? That's actually not really very specific to that.
You're not really making any decisions off the benchmarks.
I wouldn't say that. The benchmarks are designed to evaluate harness engineering models. Yeah, exactly. So I think they serve a different need actually. But certainly we see probably I'd say most of the different use cases that the benchmarks are aimed at targeting. And we just felt there was a gap in the sort of benchmark space with respect to kind of how we're evaluating models. If you compare, SweBench, for example, software engineering benchmarks to actually, returning a package or changing a flight, they're just very different. So they were aimed more at contributing to the research community than actually serving our customers.
Yeah, makes sense. So you guys have a metric. I don't know how to say it. Is it like cascade?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cascade.
Could you explain that? What is that?
Yeah, so these are non-deterministic agents, right? So effectively, you can't just say like, okay, you got it or you didn't, right? Maybe you got lucky, is I guess how I would explain it to this crowd. So, cascade is effectively how many times you got it right. So it's a metric of, across the non-determinism of an agent, how do you actually, how consistent are you? And that's because, as I mentioned, our focus is on our focus is really on getting it right 100,000 times. It's the same thing, but you need to get it right 100,000 times a day if you're doing where's my order, returning a package in a retail case. And so yeah, Cascade is sort of a nod to that. It's like, okay, you're good, but are you consistent? Getting that?
Yeah, are you good? But in terms of training data on events or just like our tasks, it can also be like, are you consistently doing it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you should like your pass rate case should be like less than 50% or something for it to be considered hard. Like on 8 runs, you should like at least fail 4 times. So that is like a consistently difficult task that the model is not able to solve. Think of it as like a class 4 student is given a class 8 problem.
Mm-hmm.
And it is supposed to fail in that. So and that's how the model is consistently improved, and that's why the human data is important. So it's like teaching kids. Like you're basically transferring all this like human knowledge into your model.
In what cases would you not care about the consistency of the outputs? Because you're saying, okay, like we want it to be consistent over 100,000 conversations. Are there cases where you wouldn't want that?
Well, yeah, actually, I mean, I think a lot of, Cloud Code or Codecs are focused on, solving novel problems. And that's what's so different, right, about this scenario. I mean, you still would want consistency because you want to get a good output every time. But if you're a coding agent, one shots your coding problem 9 out of 10 times, or even 4 out of 10 times, they're really hard coding problems to the point about it being a measure of difficulty. That's pretty great. I mean, I think for most of us, Cloud Code or Codecs or any of these, coding agent tools or CLIs feel pretty magical. And for me, it feels magical if they get it right half the time on the first try. But certainly there it's less sensitive to getting it right every time versus your package being rerouted to the wrong place. It's not. Yeah.
Harsh or anyone else have anything else? Because you guys are more training, so.
Yeah, I would say like we do pass at 1, which is like we want to make sure that it's correct the first time. Like it is not remarked as a failure, and like that helps labs with like finding how good the model is in the first time, because like eventually the end user's experience matter in the first time, right? Like when a user is trying to evaluate between like I would say GPT or like Anthropic or like Claude, you would like try to compare your answers in first try and not like see or like reiterate within the model. So yeah, I would say like the consistency is less important there. Whereas like the accuracy matters. Like you would like expect it to answer in the first try.
How do you even measure that? Like that it's performing well on like novel tasks versus it's consistently. I guess the consistency makes sense, right? Like you have a benchmark for like on a certain task, it's consistently giving you the right answer. How do you measure that it's like able to answer like novel questions with one shot? Like it can one shot like novel questions. Is there a difference or not? Does that question make sense?
What do you mean by novel question?
Like you're trying to one shot a random feature inside of a project that you're building. That's not really like a consistent thing, like you were saying that you would want to like evaluate. So like how do you measure stuff like that? I guess you guys are helping train coding models, so maybe you have some insight there.
I would say like what we do is like we create verifiers and like rubrics for this thing.
Yeah, could you explain that?
So there are like I would say 2 types of verifiers which we do. Like one is like programmatic verifier, where easy to like write a script or like a function which can verify the outputs and like say if the numbers add up or not, if it's like very decisive. And then another is like judge or LLM judge verifier, which is like where you provide the lower model or like a cheap model, basic binary decisions, whether the response has certain things mentioned or not, which is like when model can easily distinguish between like yes or no, and that becomes your rubric for your like verifier, and like based on that like eventually we derive whether the model or the agent was able to complete the task successfully or not. Like if it was like how much, like 50% success, 60% success, you can also measure the task success. based on that. I don't know if that answers your question. I'm like, this is
Yeah.
belief.
You said you're traveling a lot. Why are you traveling a lot? Why is that a big part of being an agent engineer?
Yeah, well, I would say, I mean, I would actually differentiate agent engineering from forward deployed engineering in a couple of ways. I always tell folks it's similar to accountability to customers. So at the end of the day, forward deployed engineering was effectively established as a way to bridge the gap between products and deployment of a product. And at its best, you're able to channel signal from customers back into your product organization in a superpowered way. And at its worst, you basically depend on engineers to actually deliver your product. I think Palantir had both those superpowers and those limitations. Hopefully Sierra has more of those superpowers than those limitations. I think the distinction that I see between forward deployed engineering, I think forward deployed engineering is a term actually we intentionally steered away from because I think it means so many things to so many different people. For example, forward deployed engineering can mean sales engineering. It can mean solutions engineering. At Palantir, it certainly meant engineering, but with a customer bent. Agent engineering, I think we called it agent engineering mainly to differentiate between the technical works. So while it's consistent in terms of your accountability to customers, you need to understand their workflows. It really is distinct in, effectively it's technical work, right? Building an agent is very different than configuring data integrations against 1,000 different data sources or defining an ontology. You might need to do some of those things, but actually context engineering, thinking about basically how to take an agent into production is quite different, especially given that conversational agents, especially in the customer experience space, are, they're consumer products, right? I mean, they're doing millions of conversations a week in some cases. And so really, yeah, you need to think through kind of a lot of novel things that you wouldn't think through at a Palantir where you're building, data integrations for 1,000 users maybe internally. And so that's the agentic part of it too. But certainly I think they share a lot in common. At least that's how I differentiate agent engineering versus forward deployed engineering. Yeah. Anything I can?
Yeah, I think the product feedback loop is probably the most important part of that. It could look a lot like going in and setting up workspaces, making sure customers feel heard and I don't know all the non-technical stuff when you're deploying any product, but a lot of what we focused on was building tooling around making that process a lot faster and then automating a lot of the product feedback, or just going and building stuff ourselves. So the majority of our FDEs have touched almost every piece of the product. I think where our, setup differs a little bit is that Intercom has a product that's been around for a while. We have some legacy software, we have a lot of new pieces of the product. There's a lot of things to go and change that touch a lot of customers, and that can be either pulled forward and focused on. But with the state of coding agents now and a lot of the terms when they get built, it's possible to kind of touch a little bit of everything at once, and bring that customer feedback directly into the product at incredible speeds.
So I think Sierra, you guys are also working with companies that are 150 years old, so they have they have legacy systems that are saving. Does that make their job more difficult? And if so, how?
I don't know. I mean, I think the complexity is the norm, I think one of the advantages of Palantir, I think one of the similar advantages of Sierra is our ability to serve the most complex institutions in the world. I think that's one of the places where I think you really see forward deployed work shine, is where, it's not, it's not a given that you're just going to have, readily available APIs. You might be integrating with SOAP or a mainframe from, decades ago. And so, these are, not arcane protocols or arcane systems. They're just old. And so, that's part of the challenge, and certainly not the only part of the challenge. I think similarly, at that end of the spectrum, you see a lot of policies that build up, just like, any system, whether it be political or otherwise, over time, you end up with more laws, right? You end up with more policies. And so in larger institutions with more, more decades under their belt, you can typically see large compliance functions, large security functions for a good reason, right? And if you want to protect data, your home security company, to mention ADT. And so you have to navigate that and understand how to basically deploy in a way that's safe and secure. And so, I think, hopefully that answers a bit of it. I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I mean, for
You should
those
start
days-
next time. I'll steal your. I'll follow you next time.
Yeah, the weird stuff starts to come in when you live with a lot of bigger, older institutions. That's I think a lot of the problems that you end up solving are accumulated problems. If we come across stuff that can be solved by building something new, we try to make sure that nobody else has to do it again internally. Yeah, that's what years.
What like non-intuitive things have slowed down the deployment of one of your projects that you're working on?
Yes.
I guess like Turing.com, you guys are also doing these types of engagements, right? So if you have something that killers,
Non-intuitive. That's very interesting.
because I guess like an intuitive thing would be, oh, it's a technical problem, right? So maybe it's not a technical problem, so I'm down.
I think just generally, I think like I can't speak specifics, but in generally there's like a lot of like if you ask any like department or engineers, they'll say that like AI and driving change. It's almost like organizational change more than just like a tech change. Do you see that?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So it's and I think sometimes that comes from leadership. So you might have a lot of engineers in the team who are just very hands-on and like use agents all the time. But if like the culture of the company is not very AI forward, it still won't make that much of a difference unless there is like a full like company law. So yeah, that's a very clear. I think in Meta it became a thing that like everyone was talking about like Zuckerberg's coding. and that became like a huge thing. And then like with that, and we also have that in like our company. We go with like our CEO and what's that name. So that and then you start. So that just becomes like a DNA. So more of like from a non-intuitive perspective, I think that's what he was hitting at. Also like there's a lot of like in bigger roles you do it's slower and it's more like human.
So how do you hire for that? How do you know someone is good at that?
That's a very good question. I think that's where let me say that the rate of change is faster than what we are able to make, even from like a hiring perspective. But that is where like to your point, like where the empty role sort of comes in and why anyone like so for example like if I'm looking to hire someone, I don't like now necessarily look at their background. All I'm looking for is like are they like first principles people? Like can they solve problems? Like can they just like approach this with first principles mindset? Are they technical enough? Do they have like just the critical reasoning abilities to deep dive into? Do they just understand data? If it's like a little more technical work, sure, do they like understand architecture and infrastructure? Because even engineers today are not really coding. They are making software engineering decisions. Are they able to make the right decision? So you're just mostly testing judgment at this point. But yeah, so like how do you hire for that? These are the skills that you look for and sometimes you can find that in like product managers, sometimes you find that in consultants, sometimes you find that in like engineers. Like I don't think there's like
What did Intercom see in you?
I don't know if you have to ask about it. But it's weird. You don't know who's going to run into you like on the other side of the table too. Like, you don't know who you're going to end up working with. You don't know what that organization is like. We end up looking for. I mean, we end up with a lot of people from many different backgrounds. Some people are stronger in other areas than others. But when you're working with every type of company under the sun, which happens in the customer support space, a lot of what you might end up dealing with is kind of change management of like that organization. Also, while your company is going through some great, immense change, I think everybody here is probably in a similar spot where just the velocity of new product coming out of the organization is so fast now that you have to be continuously learning about your own product and what's going on in the companies. So you get a lot of disparate things in your head, which that fit background can kind of come from a lot of different places.
Yeah. Natalie, like, do you see yourself having to do a lot of like change management with a lot of your customers?
I mean, not unless they hire me.
Yeah.
It's ultimately change management rests with our customers, right? I mean, it's our job to basically make our system work with theirs. And so, certainly we've seen all sorts of change management. And ultimately, we version and release our agents using what we call the agent development lifecycle, which, surprise, is actually just the software development lifecycle, but with agents instead. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely part of it. I mean, really, like any software system, an agent is serving traffic And I usually describe them as a microservice where every request is different and every response is non-deterministic, which makes it this really interesting engineering problem. But when you release something like that, you have to have regression tests and you have to have monitoring and understand what it's doing in production, just like any other software system. And so our product comes with that out of the box, and some of our partners also prefer a version. The brain of the agent, how it's configured, and all those different pieces, and up to and including model selection, things like that, in their agents. And so we support all of it basically.
And also like add on that when you're working with sorry your page when you're working with agents and working as a for FD, right? What our philosophy is deploy, develop, and improve, where you are constantly you deploy the product and then you develop and observe how it is performing, and there can be many changes, change of management, or they need new technical requirements, or their product has changed significantly, their workflows have changed, and you need to constantly adapt to that cycle, which becomes the agent improvement cycle, or and then your improvement aspect of it. You collect the events and you make your agents more better to adapt to their workflows, and you show the improvement and value of your agents as an FD. So that's a large part of the job of the FD to constantly evolve and second back and forth and make sure that you are presenting the value to that.
Are any of you able to talk to an actual example of a deployment that you guys did? I know in one of your blog posts you talked about the series for someone. If you're able to talk about that, I don't know if Kevin, you're able to talk about anything from someone told you, hey, you're going to go deploy this this bin agent for XYZ company. In the first 90 days, what was your job with that customer?
It's very different depending on the customer.
Yeah, let's just pick one.
We worked with one recently that was kind of a great example of a customer that can pick up the platform and run with it. I think they came in through self-serve channels. We ended up picking them up, working with them. It was a company that was not using our help desk, but wanted to go live very quickly before a major sporting event, and went from not having anything set up to fully live on Fin in under a week and a half. So a good chunk of that was we just made sure they had the right content ingested, setting up a lot of basic actions that they wanted to take, and then running through some new stuff that they weren't previously able to do, building a few procedures around that, and then handling the good chunk of implementation details with Zendesk, building it into their product in a few service areas that we cover.
How do you run tests when you're actually in that development cycle with a season?
Conversation tests, so conversation quality.
Yeah. Just what tests do you need to run before it runs live?
It depends what customer wants to do.
Yeah. So this gaming customer, what do they want?
We have a good we have a lot of internal testing tools. We also have a lot of tools that we give to our customers. That sort of depends. There's a lot of quality assurance around gaming and trading and all these types of topics. So you can't say making sure that follow regulatory guidelines around those types of things. And so a lot of it was focused on regulatory compliance and testing, making sure that their most important thing was our most important.
So for regulatory compliance stuff, at the end of the day, these are non-deterministic systems. So, you can't say with 100% accuracy that, it's never going to say something that it's not supposed to. So how do you guys think about that? Is there some kind of threshold you have in your testing that you say, hey, once we hit this threshold of we run 100,000 test cases and 99.9% of them pass, then we're okay? How do you think about that? And where does the liability fall? Does it fall on Intercom? Does it fall on the customer? How do you guys think about that?
Those are good questions.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't focus on those questions.
Okay.
the way, like, more broadly we think about, I guess, groundedness and where our answers come from, and our approach to building customer support agents is that typically somebody in the customer support space wants to be sure that the answers that their agents are giving are grounded in their content. They're not coming in from external sources. Models are going out and stuff in and making stuff up. We have a few different layers depending on what the customer wants to do. We have knowledge-based questions. That's what our normal Fin agent will take care of. We also have things called procedures, which is going to be a lot more action-based. Needs to be done by your customer support agent. Those are handled very differently. And I don't not involved in the training side.
Yeah.
But mostly, most of the customers, I'm sure that's stuff.
Natalie, any specific examples you can give?
Gosh, I mean, so many. I will say, I mean, if you think about a standard agent, just imagine you have an agent that takes some action, gets it right now 9 out of 10 times. But then if you have a supervisor agent that then can evaluate the output of the first agent and get it right roughly 9 out of 10 times, you actually end up with 99% accuracy. So you can sort of layer AI on more AI to end up with something that actually has quite high levels of accuracy, just intuitively. Now, in compliance scenarios, to your point, you might end up with a scenario where 99% or 99.999% correctness. For example, some fintechs are not banks. You cannot say that they're a bank. It is just like absolutely unacceptable. And there's many scenarios as well where you have just situations where there's regulatory reasons that an agent can never do something. And so in that case, we always lean on determinism. Actually, you can find ways to always do things. Usually it comes with some level of trade-off and rigidity in the agent, but we support that quite frequently. And similarly, you could even just imagine, every time your agent is about to respond, you just have a regex that finds, a certain phrase and not saying that, right? So, I mean, you can always make sort of significant trade-offs in the experience to actually add a layer of safety. So, I mean, in regulated industries, you have to be more cautious, but certainly it's not a non-starter for most of them.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? Because you guys are working in regulated industries as well, right?
Yeah. I think the point is mostly like R&D. Like that's in several gardens. And you will find like a lot of agents are actually like hard-to
And guardrails are like
everyone's not very
It depends, I guess.
Yeah.
We have, you can hand over to humans, right? Either say, get out of the way, agent. You were now talking to a human. You can have human in the loop for certain things. You can have code-based determinism that's like with more agentic stuff. Sort of depends on each customer, or at least us, wants to.
It's true that we come in as like a safety product, right? Like the models, there's so much in research in like AI safety and similar to that, like for agent also specifically, this is like lesser scope, right? Because it's going to be like a specific use case for an agent and multiple or a few use cases that the agent has to essentially solve because there's a goal being, right? So work backwards from there and like what are the possible like scenarios that might be possible. And typically like compliance is like that's a bit more like that it's worth better these days. But I'm actually curious like how do you make sure it's like automated and like
how do you make sure it's sorry?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a McKinsey term. Basically, Missy is basically like how do you make sure it's exhaustive?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good point. And I think, Harsh, you had a point earlier about sort of telling the agent all the things you don't want to do. Our customers don't like doing that. They say, what, you want me to tell the agent every single thing that it could possibly not do? So you have to design a system where that's not required, right? So I actually think of it a little bit. Who here's familiar with vector space? Sorry, crazy question. Sorry, not to ask you. So basically, just think about a plane. You have 3 dimensions. Let's just say 3 dimensions. You have 2 lines that are close to each other. We use this all the time. If you have a vector database, it's actually you're basically storing things that are semantically close to each other and then finding things like king is supposed to be, So anyway, I think about it in those terms. This, by the way, I'm just sharing the way that I think about it. Do not quote me on this. This is just like my mental model. And so I think what's interesting is when you have an agent that can help you with your finances. If you ask about, what dog food you should get for your pet, that's obviously out of bounds, right? So that's like way far off. So it's like way over here. If you have an agent that can help you with your finances and you ask it to, file a dispute for you, that's a lot closer. And so that agent, if you say you are a financial services assistant, and you say, file this dispute and they can't do that, that's actually the range where you actually end up in this kind of close guardrail space. And so just intuitively, basically, you have to think about what is within the domain I'm operating in that could be risky that's actually out of scope. And the advantage for Sierra is that, we have built-in guardrails for all the stuff far out, including abuse detection, things like that. And then we also have guardrails that are specific to each industry as well. So we actually build industry capabilities there. And all of our agents get transferred to human. So we have sort of this escape hatch that we can pull, where you can effectively just say, okay, I'll just get you connected to a human, problem solved. So you have this defense in depth layer, and you really need to think through, like, what are the classes of those things? But the clearly out of bounds stuff, easy. The close stuff you have to think a little bit about. But by and large, we spent a lot of time thinking about it. So thankfully, don't have many issues these days.
So once you deploy an agent, how do you maintain it so that when a new model comes out 6 months from now, that you're getting the best of both worlds on that, you're getting the benefits of that new model without having to run all your tests again, or you're okay with that, just running all your tests again, just how does that work?
We eval every model when it comes out, and in fact, and to the point earlier about change management, we absolutely have to have rigorous change management on any model that we release. And oftentimes, we'll roll it out as well in stages. We don't just flip a switch. And what's interesting is, new models are actually not always better. And there's sort of an expectation that, and you see the benchmarks go up to the right, that every new model is going to be a clear improvement for your agent. But that's actually not what we've seen. And so we eval them and sometimes find ways to tweak our implementation, our kind of leveraging of them to get the most out of them, and then usually see an improvement over time. But yeah, we've not seen every single new model actually improve, which is really interesting. And we also, fine-tune a lot of our own models in-house. And so as a result, those models are typically significantly far ahead of any model that's sort of general model for the tasks that we care about, which means that, it would take sort of a lot to beat those models. Yeah.
When, let's say you want to improve an agent, what's the first thing that you would try to improve on? Would you say, let's immediately start the post-training model to make it better? Would you say, we need to update the harness somehow, we need to make changes to the harness? What other levers do you have to pull to make the outcome better?
Yeah, I mean, in our case, a lot of the configuration falls with Mercor after that team and the initial team steps away. We still have pretty different touch points, but we try to build in those tools for customers to be able to use. I guess from their perspective, honestly, themselves. While we're working on the back end to make a product that's useful for our entire customer base.
Okay, so they're making those changes themselves.
Yes.
Okay. What about that at Sierra? Are your customers making those tweaks, or are you?
In particular, so just any type of tweak, so agent configuration.
No, you just want to make your the output better. Again, however you measure that, right? You're probably multiple different dimensions.
Yeah, the model layer is actually a layer that I would pull later than you might expect. I mean, there's so much that you can do in just the orchestration of these models. I think it's even at GPT 3.5 or 4, it already felt like just getting the most out of those models and figuring out the right ways to orchestrate them could, be, a multi-year effort. So models certainly are a piece of it, but it's not just the models, it's really how you orchestrate them together and use them to actually orchestrate a conversation. And it's at least in our space. And so I think, if you look at some of the harness engineering work, Anthropic would probably define an agent as a model running with tools. And that's actually not really how we think about our agents. Their conception is, which I think is actually probably the most commonly understood conception of an agent today, is very model dependent, whereas ours is actually much more orchestration dependent. So in that case, to your particular question, customers absolutely are configuring the knobs and dials at that layer. Usually they get to where they need to without having to ask or swap out the model. If they ever did, we would say, have you turned this knob? And if they said yes, then we would say, okay, let's swap out the model. So yeah, we're just focused on the best outcome, and there's always a lot of different knobs and dials.
Have you ever seen, like, once you've deployed an agent that it just degraded in performance, you had to go back and fix it, and what was the reason?
Well, I mean, our models, or rather our agents are fully encapsulated releases. So, I mentioned that we treat our agents as software. And so just like the software, it's like if you regress your app, there's a commit hash, right? Where you can actually say, okay, this is what broke it. So you could not regress the model or, an agent, without actually being able to pinpoint exactly what changed in it, which is quite important for our partners. So certainly, it's possible that an agent can get worse, but then I ask, well, why don't we have regression tests? Why did you make this change? But that's really, I mean, all of our agents in production have both release blocking, continuous integration regression tests before they go live. But just like any integration testing suite, that may have gaps in terms of coverage. And so it's just important. And one of the things we as a team do is make sure that whether we're building the agent or our customers are building the agent, we take ownership of the outcome. So we want regression tests. We want to make sure that we review the agent before it goes out.
So on Twitter, a lot of people complain that as soon as Opus is released, or as soon as they release a model, it performs really well, and then it degrades over time. It just gets worse and worse. So have you seen that actually happen in production? I'm assuming you guys are using some the Opus model for some deployments. But do you actually see that?
Well, if I remember correctly, the Opus scenario was more about the orchestration of the model. So the underlying orchestration of it changed. Not necessarily.
What do you mean by that?
Well, there were two things actually. There was one where, and I'm not super steeped in the Twitterverse, so someone else here, if you are, you can let me know. But sorry, the experts. So there was one instance where I believe Claude changed something like the budget, the context budget, something like that. And folks were complaining about it degrading. And then the most recent Opus release, I remember, it was more in the model layers. So that was sort of more to my point earlier about each new model does not always guarantee sort of a monotonic improvement in performance. So anyway, in that case, it's you got to test the model with your orchestration framework at scale to really know if it's going to actually make a difference. So I can't comment on that particularly. But I will say, our evals, because we're evaluating every model that goes out to production, frequently, evaluates the model before it will go out. So, can't comment on any models in particular, but we have a rigorous eval process for a reason.
But you're not seeing that as soon as 4.7 is released, that all of your agents running on 4.6 are just they just immediately degrade.
I have not seen that. No.
We also have not seen that.
Okay.
But a lot of customer service agents I think is so many different orchestration mechanisms.
Yeah.
Lots of different models that are all working together to provide that final answer as fast as we can do it, as accurately as we can do it, as safe as we can do it. And for kind of your question around testing, does the biggest, baddest model out there actually perform better? A lot of the times, no, it's better. It's relatively, it's sometimes slower. I mean, you wouldn't go ask, which 1 plus 1, it's like I'm moving it with a significantly different answer. So you don't always need to pick the biggest, spiciest model for every single task. That's kind of where a lot of fun goes in. That's where a lot of our testing lies, right? It's building that layer so customers don't have to think about it, and letting them configure things in a way that doesn't, involve prompt engineering. It doesn't involve thinking about what models are in it. It's just setting up content, it's configuring a few things, and letting the answers flow, and making sure that it does the right thing when they want it to, if whatever constraints they want to place on it.
Yeah, so Natalie, you also mentioned that you guys use the constellation models. What do you mean by that?
We use them to get to a single answer.
We also use
So in what scenarios do you use certain models over others? And what's the average number of models that you use for a region?
Oh gosh, I don't know if I could tell you the number. Here I'd have to say 75 for a single answer. No, I'm joking. I mean, it's agent dependent. It's dependent upon the configuration. There's so much to our orchestration layer that sits under the hood. What's ultimately though, any sort of broader task like orchestrating a conversation, if I sort of asked you to walk to the store, you go down the street, take a right, each of those might be a different task or a different thing that you use. And so, we use a lot of them. We partner with all of them, I'd say maybe not all, but many, if not most of the leading inference providers out there. Capacity is scarce at our scale. And so, we're constantly actually onboarding more, and we have a lot of emails that go into basically what our default constellation is, and folks still sometimes ask to use their own, and we're happy to do that. So
You mentioned that you guys are like host training your own models. That's actually a good question. Where are you like hosting? If you can talk about that. Like, are you guys?
unfortunately, that I could probably talk about. Yeah.
Okay. Why not just use those post training models? Like why even use this? Why even use like ChatGPT or like distributed model at all?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of reasons. I mean, one is, it's not guaranteed that fine-tuned model will always perform better on any task. That's not, it's not a truism. In fact, in terms of general knowledge, you would actually see some of regression in overall performance in fine-tuned model. But another reason is probably the most important reason is resilience as well. So, these inference providers are not at the level of uptime you would expect of a hyperscaler like AWS. So, AWS, they never go down. When they do, though, everyone hears about it. So you could probably think of the last time that they went down. And there's different regions, different parts or services in AWS that go down, but inference is much less resilient than many other services that you'd expect to use. So if you're building a platform where you're serving millions and millions of conversations a week, 5 minutes of downtime is really material for our customers. And so when that happens, right, when an inference provider goes down, especially if you have a constellation approach, you actually need to be able to fall back automatically to the next best available model. So we built that actually in the earliest stage of the company. It was, oh no, X provider's down. I won't name any names. Quick, flip the switch. Now it's fully automated. And so you might see sometimes even, one inference provider that's down, a second that's experiencing high latency. You might actually need to go to a third. And so this is, I think, one of the things people often don't think about in reliable agentic systems is that you actually really need to have almost a defense in depth or resilience in depth for your platform. And so, yeah.
You were going to say something?
Oh, no. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a mosh pit of models under there. Like, you have to always test which one is.
Your favorite phrase. I'm going to use that. More constellation.
There we go. You have to know which ones are the best for which tasks, and when when one goes down, you need to get a hotspot or something. That's uniquely performant. Otherwise, you're giving your customers a worse experience, which.
Yeah. Actually, a question. So, for the forward deployed engineers, when can they decide that, hey, our entire constellation of models that we have available to us to make this customer's agent perform well isn't good enough, so we need to go fine tune another model? Like, how do they make that decision? Like, is there some kind of they have to go to their skip boss and ask for that? Because that's obviously going to be expensive, or is it not really expensive? It's also probably going to take some time. You have to get data. How does a forward deployed engineer think about that? That's here.
Well, if your customer is getting subpar performance due to a model, then presumably other customers are too. And so really it goes back to the product prioritization question and that feedback loop where we should actually be evaluating why are we underperforming here. So it's not usually an isolated thing where someone sort of goes on a journey to fine-tune a model just for one person, but certainly if we identify that on a particular task a model's underperforming, we would absolutely evaluate all options. And in fact, one of the places we do this a lot is actually in not necessarily fine-tuning, but thinking about the model layer more is in voice agents. So voice agents, we work with Singtel, and Singtel is one of the largest telecommunication companies in the world. They're based out of Singapore, but they own a lot of sort of other telcos. And Singlish, getting Singlish right was incredibly important to them. And they listened to our default California sounding voice, and it was like, oh, no. And so there it's actually, I sort of described the hero's journey of model discovery. Whether that be fine tuning a model or optimizing a transcription model or, any of those things, we've really built a modular architecture so you can sub in and out different things. So there we evaluated a number of different providers as well as a number of different models. And one of the things that I think, one of the reasons our partners choose us, I think, is that we have that flexibility to basically get the best model. In that case, we ended up actually building our own Singlish synthesis model. And we hired a voice actor who's fantastic. And so see, if anyone here has the opportunity to call Singtel, I hope you.
Cool. So I was going to ask, so you guys started building chatbots, and you guys, right? I think you said you started with like the workflow builder, and then you moved to build chatbots. Why did you guys move to build voice agents? And I would like to ask you that as well, Kevin. Are you guys building voice agents? Are you building chatbots? But maybe we can start with Natalie.
Sure. Voice is the dominant channel in the world. So more people call customer support over the phone than they do in chat. And so it was a natural next step for us. I'd say these days voice actually is a higher volume than chat in Sierra's ecosystem. But generally, I mean, we think the idea of a channel, whether it be chat or voice, or ChatGPT or Live Assist, any of Sierra's different platforms. Ultimately, we think that the agent's brain should actually scale to each of those channels. So, most of our partners actually choose both chat and voice. And, many of them actually have gone from basically having multiple teams that would maintain their chat agent and then their voice side, into just one shared team that actually built their agent. So SiriusXM, for example, Harmony, you can chat with her on SiriusXM's website, and when you call, Harmony also picks up the phone. So it's just the same agent, basically.
Yeah. Kevin, you want to go? Are you guys mostly a chatbot right now, or you guys
Thanks for the native voice-to-voice models. The reason being that those models are not necessarily accurate enough in some ways to really serve traffic at that scale. So in terms of tool calling, in terms of hallucinations, basically no one that I've seen is really quite using them yet today. So the technology is still evolving. And then there's also just a tremendous amount that goes into a good voice agent beyond just what you say, right? It's those 3 different layers of model. It's also diarization, basically of different voices. So determining, who's talking and things like that. Background noise is obviously a much bigger challenge. So, I think it makes sense given that what you say, the response side of that is effectively a chat agent in some ways. You also have to adjust it for the channel. But yeah, ultimately I think it's just, it made sense to start on chat. I would probably still do that today if I was here thinking about starting a conversational AI company.
Cool. So just to clarify, you're saying that the models right now, are just not good enough to do real time. And so by real time, you mean when I talk into the microphone, that the model is directly synthesizing speech versus how does it work right now?
So effectively to hear the customer and transcribe the audio. That transcribed audio basically is fed into some system that generates a response, which is effectively the chat part. And then the response is synthesized out using text to speech. So those 3 layers basically all basically affect agent. We also need to handle things like interrupt handling, right? And also imagine, just like if you're on the phone with somebody, say just a second, I gotta pull that up for you. There's a lot of like small nuances where you're trying to, from first principles, figure out, okay, what is human conversation that you see in voice and you don't see in chat. So.
And you said the reason why you guys are not going straight for like the real time models, they're just not enough.
Yeah, I mean, not for our use case, not for the correctness standard that we set for us.
Specifically on like long horizon tools. They're not
on a whole host of things.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I would like to add on this. We also have AI interview where we have things like audio, like we still transcribe the audio and then feed it into the models or like infrastructure rather than like the actual model capability to transcribe and then respond to the voice. Because like we have also not found a significant like improvement or like it's if it is that is high latency other than you like rely on like own infrastructure to transfer and having the flexibility of choosing models once it is classified. And like, one significant change we have seen in office as well is like everybody has like whisper flow mics.
Yeah.
And like nobody is typing
It was
it.
taking over.
Everybody's just like pressing the function button like and chatting and their lot always doing stuff. So it's a significant change and evolution which has like come in the industry. Like
That is honestly something that has blown my mind. How many people are talking to computers these days?
nobody's
Wow.
like science.
Yeah, that's true.
Do you guys have a line of engineers with just have microphones? Or?
No, people are still just whispering into their computer.
All right. Those are all the questions that I had. We can leave it to the audience if you guys have any questions you guys want to ask. Yeah. In 10 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, so I know you mentioned when it comes to change management, that's usually left for the customer. So from the customer side of things, if we are, say, customer, how do we go about change management?
Yeah, good question. It honestly differs, and you have to think about every single layer in the infrastructure. So, Sierra has effectively a platform layer where effectively we own, that platform, and then on top of that, their agent is actually merged into their own change management process. So, I mean, ultimately, it just depends on what's there. And honestly, in the CX world, what's been so interesting is you oftentimes have a CX / product team that's maintaining an agent or an operational team that's typically not technical maintaining an agent. Or you have a technical team that's actually building an agent in-house. Sometimes you have both and they want to interoperate and figure out where the boundaries lie between each of them. And so honestly, it really differs a lot depending upon what model you fit into. We have partners that are fully building their agents in code. It's, fully backed by GitLab or GitHub or, effectively their continuous integration and continuous deployment processes. And we have some where their release process is fully in the UI as well. So, we support both. Ultimately, it's up to them. And I think the key thing is, we advise that they sort of sort out where it fits in. And I've seen some pretty far-flung approaches and, it's a good your question.
I have two questions. The first one is across all those different activities, setting up evals, back workflows, etc. Like, how are you thinking about percentage of time distribution on average for a given project? First question. Second question is a lot of enterprises are now focused on cost savings, especially with inference. How are you supporting your customers in regards to that objective? So those are two questions.
Yeah, so in terms of the time split, it really varies. In terms of the activities that you're doing, right? Setting up evals, integrating with, customer APIs, defining the agent, guardrails, testing the agent is a big one. Actually integrating it on a partner site, or over the phone. I've learned more about telephony protocols in my time at Sierra than I ever thought I would know. PSTN is actually like decades old, stands for the Public Switch Telephone Network. I know that now. It really varies. Some folks might have really, really complex APIs, and some folks might have a really complex agent where actually the orchestration is the hard thing. With tools like Ghostwriter now, actually the initial definition of the agent, things that used to take a long time, now don't take much time. So, unfortunately, I probably have a deeply unsatisfying answer in reference to that. And then I'm sorry, what was the second question again?
Cost savings strategies.
Yeah. So, ultimately, we think the inference should get cheaper. And are getting cheaper over time. There's a little bit of a counteracting force, which is that oftentimes when inference gets cheaper, you can actually do more thinking to get to a better answer. And so even though if you think about how cheap inference is today for GPT-4 level intelligence, it's dramatic. It's been, orders of magnitude 1,000x plus reductions over the past 2 years. But we now have reasoning models. And so companies are paying a lot basically to do deep reasoning on different problems. And most people actually start with the highest level of reasoning, or at least most people I know start with the highest level of reasoning if they're using Claude Code, because you get to a better answer. And so folks have shown that they're willing to actually pay more, whether you're a software engineer or otherwise, for more reasoning. So we tend to pass those on to our customers, but also be our number one metric of success is saving them tremendous amounts of money. We actually have outcome-based pricing towards that. So we actually charge for outcomes, not conversations. So it actually divorces what we're paid from what we're actually paying inference providers, because if we have a bad agent, we might be underwater. It's like if we're, we only resolve 20% of cases, that's not very good for us. So we try to actually increase that number too, so that our customers are saving a bunch of money and we're not charging for our costs.
Do you guys also default to the highest reason just because you also have to think about latency?
We don't for that reason, you can't wait 28 seconds for a voice agent to respond. That's why we orchestrate models together. We do all sorts of latency down.
Yeah, so you okay basically like where does higher reasoning actually count, and you choose your model out of it. And then for other tasks you don't need as much reasoning. So
yeah, it's a little more nuanced than that.
Yeah, like that's something.
Should be about the before model experience. So you guys are hands-on and how is the strategy in like for 6 months before on a really working, but still working the customer resources. How was it formulated? Was it more like big pilot versus this work together and it works? How do you decide the life?
Are you asking particularly for Sierra?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I want. Okay. The paid proof of concept is really core to what we do. It's very rare that we don't do a proof of concept with any customer. The reason being that actually it's twofold. One is we want them to know it works. And the second is that, we want to understand sort of what resolutions they can expect, right? We want to actually know how good can we get this agent. So early on, I think, the product was novel and really required tremendous engineering. I remember I launched the Sonos setup assistant, and if you use that agent today, it's much better. Now, it wasn't. It was dramatic. It was a dramatic improvement over their existing solution, but by today's standards, I think would not hold up well. But really, the key was like finding ways to go live with a novel technology safely. So, what limitations did you put on it? We actually went live behind their existing chatbot, which was basically a Salesforce solution where you click through. So, I think a lot of the proof of concept phase is about proving value in a way that's safe and sort of palatable to actually enter this new world, because everyone wants to use AI. The problem is that they don't want to blow up their business and be on the front page of the New York Times. And so that's kind of the tension that they navigate.
And how to put the products before starting the donations? The big question here is it one starts before the product exists or before the product is good enough. Was that the case, or your need reached the last one before you start?
We are pretty real products. It certainly looks nothing like today's product looks. One of our founders is sort of famously an incredible software engineer, and I had rebuilt it actually the week before I started. And I came in and was receiving a walkthrough of the product, and the guy who's doing it, he's now kind of engineering, was like, oh shoot, that button moved. And so there was a lot of iteration on the product at that point, but it was quite real. And it was, it was just built from the start with enterprise readiness in mind too. So I think that's actually one of the things that if any of you are thinking about starting a company with sort of a forward deployed motion, I think really starting with enterprise readiness, like thinking through how is this going to fit with role-based access controls? Am I audit logging data? Or am I audit logging actions rather? Those are the things that I think actually are hard to walk back later, but are very easy to think about at the start. So that's another thing too that I think Sierra did quite right. I claim no credit for it. I just deployed the first agents. So
yeah, I'm curious how many of you have heard like the mismanaged genius hypothesis, which is basically that there's a lot more to get out of the models that we currently have, and that actually we need to decompose our task architecture into a way that we could probably get a lot more out of smaller models. And what you think about that. But the second part is from a business perspective. Two of you work at companies which would rudely be described as wrappers around the models right now, or at least the business is pushing towards wrapper. And the others is like very much dependent on supporting the model companies. And as engineers in these companies, how do you think about that and reason about that problem right now? To all of you.
just mention this.
Yeah, for us, I think one of the most important things that our team at Focus on Fin does is make sure that they're not keeping models in too tight of a box. Right? There's this balance, and we want to give people the best version of what you can give them, but you also need your customer success leaders to know that they have control over it. And so it's this interesting balancing act, but are looking to constantly testing if we can kind of loosen the reins or get capabilities and how to do that safely.
I think to answer your first question on mismanaged genius, it's a very interesting question. I think like largely if you think about it, also like this is like probably like a biased view, like this is just like my personal view. Like yeah, sure, like all of us are just using these models generally like now to like as like search tools or like to chat with them, therapists. I know like astrology is a big use case for ChatGPT apparently, but yeah, those are like some of the use cases. But like as the apps are getting integrated with the chat, like it's becoming more powerful, right? So like our productivity, at the end of the day, it's the productivity system in some ways. And then if you just think about like where the labs and where they're targeting, like OpenAI is a bit more consumer focused and with enterprise goals. That's basically where you could think of like managing the genius in some ways to monetize. At the end of the day, everyone wants to essentially monetize the product. So that's just one way to think about it. But to your point on like yes, are we maximizing our usage from the existing models? No, of course not. Like how to do that? Like you could do that like, and that's where the agents come into the picture. Mentioned like today, what a company can do, or like building a company and getting it successful is just so much quicker. So you just like start thinking about managing employees and agents, right? Like what you would probably take like 1.5 years to do. I know like some of my friends are doing it in 2 to 3 months. That's like your efficiency. Now how you do it, like whether you do break it down into structured tasks or you build agents around it, that's like an approach. Right. In my opinion. And to your second question on as engineers who are working on in companies training models, like basically providing data to train the models versus like on the agent side, applied data. That's the question. How do you like? So is the question that like how like what makes an engineer different?
How are you reasoning about it, knowing that that there's one camp that's saying, well, the models are just going to get so much better over the next year, 24 months, that will a huge chunk of your revenue be disappearing? Now that's a business question. But as engineers, do you feel that way right now? That is the direction of travel. We're on this trajectory where the model labs are going to eat up all the data that you can provide them. They'll take every environment that you can give them, and then they'll be in a position with Claude managed agents or whatever to say, thank you very much. I now have a business to continue without you. We don't need you as a vendor anymore. Like, do you feel as engineers that that really is the way that we're heading? Or there's consistently for decades to come going to be this need to generate verifiers and environments and continuously build.
Like basically, if it's a question of like the longevity of the human data goodness or just like the environment or the environment.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm qualified to answer that question, but it's good for the next 2 to 3.
Yeah.
2 years is a long term present.
We don't know. There are good models coming every 3 months.
It's so hard to predict what's happening in 6 months. Right?
Yeah, it's a very hard question. But yes, like I mean, the models are getting so much better that the capabilities. Basically, at the end of the day, you're providing data. Like think of it as like as someone who's growing up. Like you're learning math, learning reasoning, you're learning English, you're learning how to, and then based on those core capabilities, you're solving more complex problems. And then you do a PhD in something, and that's like you're finding your model.
Mm-hmm.
Think of it like that. And it's like brain development. And so to answer your question, like okay, like do we think like then will there ever be there'll be a different modality? Like there'll be like I don't know, there'll be robotics, right?
Sure.
So do we think this will exhaust? Some point, yes. But I think the environment
Yeah, I was just trying like little exhaust when we have AGI, so it's far from here, right? And like as we are able, like as we improve the models, and like as people have more improved version of models, they have something better to do, and like they don't have to worry about like less or like redundant tasks or like which are the boring parts of their life. So people will always upscale with the models and like get better from different directions, and you'll always need models to catch up with the people. That's my view on this.
What are your guys' thoughts on synthetic data? Are you guys starting to generate now? What are you guys doing there?
So I think synthetic pipelines are very common. Like labs do it, labs ask us to display. And there's sometimes there are advantages to it, but yes, like so to your point, like the models are getting so much better that you either need like way more expensive experts, you need time from those very expensive experts to create these like very high complex tasks that can save the model. It's like getting like the best professor at Harvard to teach. And then there are some tasks that you can just like get caught to do. And so that will be a researcher preference at some point in time. But there are some core, there's like a core real world data need that is not that can't be used.
Yeah, Harsh, what are your thoughts? Great.
Yeah, I'm wish that enables all the labs to like, scale faster compared to like real world data, like expert generated data. Like, I think almost all of the human data providers are like have their own priorities.
Sure. Sorry. You're just so energetic.
Can I go?
Yeah.
Thanks for this conversation. Super awesome to your experiences on both ends. Just curious, like, what's the most unexpected or fun response that you've ever got from your agents?
I don't know if I could share. I also appreciate the most unexpected response and most charming responses I've gotten from humans to our agents.
Stuff from humans.
Yeah. I was really charmed by one of our partners is I probably shouldn't say who it is, but a large subscription-based business. And we do technical troubleshooting for them. Again, a 20-minute long call, this elderly gentleman just said like, "You're a good AI. Oh, thank you." And I was just so charmed. I don't know why. It just stuck with me. I just thought it was really charming. And that same agent, I will say, one thing I'm very proud of is my mother I was catching up with, and she said, do you all do work with blah, blah, blah? I was talking to an agent, and it was so good. And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know this would be so impactful. So anyway, just charming experiences.
I don't think you could beat that.
Oh,
You're a good
you're a good AI. Thank
I
you.
like sending memes.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't know why I did customer support agents for some reason. A lot of that.
So we all know is letting agents respond.
Yeah, everyone memes.
Yeah. And then you got a question, right?
Yeah, my question was kind of an extension of the previous discussion, like for Turing and Mercor. There seems to be like increasing competitiveness in this like data solutions for foundation model space, right? We can scale, we can comment, like Surge AI, which is going to be accurate query. Like, how do you guys respectively think about kind of carving out a different solution in this space, and how do you think about like as the models are changing so rapidly, these companies are probably looking for different types of data. How do you predict like what is the next data gap, and how do we get ahead of that?
I would say like it comes with like working closely with these labs and like having a relationship with like them and all the researchers, and like having strong research teams within the company who can like help us predict and benchmark the models and like show labs where the gaps are, and like help them suggest like where they should like train and like, provide the human resources and like experts from the marketplace. So yeah, I would say like having a good research team would like help even our company and like the labs for like showing where the data gaps are and like how we can do loss analysis and stuff like that to eventually figure out like where the model is lacking and like how it can be improved.
I see. So you guys are catching sometimes gaps that maybe the model companies already didn't see.
Exactly.
I think, yes, so to answer your question, at every point in time, we're always working on something that they want to improve the model, or like something that will be used in a new model, or like probably they use 3 to 6 months. So you're always, whatever you're building is proprietary and it's for the future. So you have foresight into what was going to get better at. And like evals and like failure modes is like pretty complicated. If you don't know what the model is not good at, you can't like offer that expertise to the customer. And generally, like having very, very close and embedded relationship with the researchers is a very good part of being able to strong results. You start thinking like that. So you also sort of get that image. But and then so this is a very good question in terms of like where should you like strategically bet, right? Like as a company from like modality perspective. Do you bet on multimodality or do you bet on like in GDP RAN and like enterprise models? But if you I think like the more you read, the more papers you read, the more on top of research you are, you know where it's like.
What are you guys generally seeing is not like the agents aren't performing well at right now?
I would say, I don't know. Like I would say long horizon fast, but like that's
I think like changing assumptions, like reasoning, like the reasoning state intact with changing assumptions is like something that the models will have. And especially if there are like multiple key calls, and I think it will always default to solving. Like some of the models will always default to solving something special code, even if you ask them to solve something cool software. Like they're like nuanced like that, but.
Also, I would say like working in multi-agent and where like there are like multiple agents and like coordinating with those agents and like making sure they get the work done. I would say there is like a lot of scope of improvement there.
So is that why agent teams and hard code is slow stream out right now?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, for sure. Like agent to agent interactions.
Yeah.
So including orchestrating like some agents, you would call that the same thing? Like right now they're just not great at orchestrating some agents?
I would say coordinating the work of the agent and like making sure that like the end task is what we want and like not getting confused in between or like not getting stuck or like the orchestration layer at that of the game. How we orchestrate the one agent or like sub agent.
Cool.
I'm curious which part of your job you're most excited about and which part you feel like set in the corner stand on.
I love my job. And it's the best job I've ever had. It's amazing. I just get to build agents off. Like that's so fun. You get to put them out there and then see what people say and prove the agent, and you have like clear metrics where you can help on. It's like, okay, we're solving 40% of cases. Let's get 70. It's very for someone like me, it's very reward oriented. We'll say just perhaps like a trade process. It's a really, really fantastic job. So I actually don't have anything that I dread. I really enjoy talking to customers. I really enjoy building agents and really pretty much every aspect of it. There's one challenge. I mean, at Sierra, over the past 2 years, we've seen growth that is like unprecedented for a company that delivers a product like ours. If I always say to folks joining the team, Palantir had a very sort of white glove, high touch model. And scaled where they did over the course of 16 years. In Sierra, we're basically doing the same in 3. And so that tension, right, and doing all of the processes, all of the ways that you build have to evolve at that speed. And so I think that just means things are breaking all the time. But I also like fixing things, so it's a fun part of my job too. But yeah, I agree. So,
yeah, I'd say it's the same thing. And yeah, I think what I love about my job, like you can basically foresee what AI might, like, little bit, like, what AI might be very good at, like, a few months, a year down the line, like, you might do that, like, so shift toward it, and you're shaping that to some extent. So that's the good part. You start thinking, like, you're at the front, shaping the manual. That's and I think like actually we have the vantage point of being able to see how it's being deployed in enterprises also, so you can see that like gap, right? Because you can see the models become like really good, but then there is like even Anthropic and OpenAI are building services organizations in the right? So there is a clear gap. And why is that? And so how do we bridge that? That's like a good part. And yeah, one things are always breaking. Everything is always on fire, and but it's a function of like the space you're in. It's like evolving. The rate of change is faster than any of us see.
Yeah, I have the same things. The thing I don't like about my job is that I don't give enough time to do all the like interesting things that you can run after. I mean, our job is partially to automate ourselves out of a job, but I'm not particularly worried that we will find other things to do. We kind of have the problem where AI has not really taken anybody's job at Intercom yet, but has actually given us more interesting problems. I think that it has taken away a lot of the routine stuff that might have taken up time otherwise, which gives you, kind of more of an opportunity to go after bigger, hairier problems that are way more fun to go after.
Yeah, I would say likewise that. Enabling and like thinking like what's next and how we can block next one and like where the gap lies is the most exciting part of like thinking how we can like create it better and creating better environments, how we can like make it more realistic like a real world, because like at the end of the day agent or model is being tested in the real world, so making the environments as close to as real world is the challenge, and like that's the most interesting thing I find with the whole job.
All right. That's all the time that we have. Can we get a round of applause for the emails? We might just have like 5 minutes if anyone wants to come up and just ask any questions, but then we do have to get going pretty soon. So, yeah.